Those are bright lights.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for sticking around for the final session of the day. My name is Stevenson. I'm an editor with Bloomberg News here in Tokyo, and I'm delighted to have Jason Calacanis here, author, investor, entrepreneur. Actually, which of those titles do you like the most?
That is a great question. Thanks for having me, and thanks for agreeing to do the interview. I appreciate it. I think the thing I enjoy the most in the moment is interviewing people on my podcast. I like being in a conversation about the future or technology or entrepreneurship, and I find that I get into like a flow experience. But I also have that same flow experience when I'm writing. As you know, as a writer, if it's a good writing day. Other days, and you're a writer, you want to kill yourself because the words are not coming out at the pace you want them to or the quality level. But investing is the most financially rewarding, obviously, and it probably is the most good that you can do in the world. Because when you invest in a founder, founders typically want to change the world by solving some big problem. They typically don't go into entrepreneurship because they want to harm the world or create a bad product. I mean, sometimes they do harm the world, Facebook. Sometimes they do create a bad product. But they mostly want to create something good. And when they do, they create many jobs, which is good for society. And most of the time, the government or religion or NGOs, they have very good intent and they have mixed results. Entrepreneurs are the ones who change the world. And, you know, if we look at something like global warming, we could argue who has a bigger impact on solving that problem. But I would say Elon Musk and what he's done with electric cars and solar and the other, people in renewable energy are going to have a bigger impact than the governments. Now, the governments can make some rules and some guidelines, but the entrepreneurs will create beautiful products like the Tesla Model 3, which if anybody's driven it will tell you is the best car ever made, hands down. Those kind of products can change the world the same way the iPhone did or the PC.
So you spent the past week talking to entrepreneurs as well as executives, investors, really a wide range of folks here. So what's your takeaway so far, having spent a week here, settled in? You're probably going to go back with some sort of big ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I love cities, and I grew up in New York City, which is what most people would consider the best city in the world, or one of them. I lived in Los Angeles, and now I live in San Francisco, and San Francisco is a wonderful group of people, but a terribly run city. So when I come to Tokyo, I'm always super inspired by how well run the city is, and how welcoming the people are, and how efficient it is. It's just such a beautiful city. And so it's always inspiring for me to come here. In terms of the business, I've been trying to figure that out because we don't see too many Japanese companies coming to America, at least not like we used to. There was a period of time where Americans were a little bit scared of how quickly Japanese products were coming to America. Sony, Nintendo, et cetera, Toyota, Honda. And we've been so inspired by the Japanese people and the Japanese culture and the Japanese products and the Japanese way of doing business, Kanban, et cetera. So I wondered why we're not seeing Japanese startup companies wanting to go global. I travel around the world, and when I meet, and founders come to Silicon Valley constantly, but not Japanese ones that often. And I wonder why that is. Why don't they want to bring their companies to America the way other folks do, or the way Americans, as an investor in Uber, they wanted to bring it to every city. Facebook wants to be in every country. Airbnb wants to have hosts in every country. So I found that kind of peculiar because when I was growing up, we saw so much exporting of culture here. And I've done a lot of investigation, and I have some theories as to why.
What are the most interesting opportunities you've seen here? And you can go by sector or specific instances. I mean, it doesn't even have to be international. It could just be for the local market as well. But
today I was introduced to artificial intelligent characters on YouTube that are played by people in Japan using motion capture, and one of them has 2 million followers. I thought that was pretty crazy. And that's like a very specific Japanese culture type thing. But I think the opportunity, there's two really interesting opportunities. One is, this is such a great country to live in, a city to live in. And from what I understand, when I was here 10 years ago, it wasn't very easy to get a work visa here. And people wanted to come here to live and work, but maybe it was a little protectionist about people coming here, much like America is now, actually, unfortunately. But now, from what I understand, the borders are a little bit more open, and Japan is open for business. I think there's a major opportunity for American companies to set up shop here. You have incredible developers and designers. And I've been talking to the investors here, and they were telling me the valuations of companies, $500,000, $2 million, $4 million in the early days. And we don't see those kind of valuations anymore in America. And then the ability to go public here with 10 million in revenue. I mean, I have many companies in my portfolio that have 10 million in revenue, and they're going to wait till they have 500 million in revenue or $1 billion in revenue to go public. So the public markets here are also super efficient. So there's an opportunity for Japanese founders to think global and bigger. And there's an opportunity for Japanese and American investors to collaborate on investing in companies, and perhaps even taking some American companies that have great revenue, partnering with companies here that have a great foothold here, and take them public. So that really captured my imagination.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just as a side note, it's also interesting to note that because the ability to go public, the threshold was so low here, now there's a bit of a backlash, and that you see lower quality companies going public.
Yeah.
They really shouldn't be. So there's sort of a flip side to that. How about for U.S. startups and investors as well? Where can they come in and make a difference here?
I think the American investors have so much opportunity right now in America that it's unlikely that they will be coming here to invest in the companies, because it's a big, long flight, and they're just drowning in opportunity. Literally, I get hundreds of emails a day from founders, and when I look out at my peers or downstream investors, I'm an angel, but looking down at venture capitalists, they don't want to take more than a 1-hour flight. So they'll fly from San Francisco to Los Angeles or Portland, Seattle, maybe Austin, on occasion New York, but they generally don't go much further than that. The big opportunity really is to build a base of angel investors here and take what we've learned in America about angel investing and bring it here. One of the things that has become incredibly successful in America is the concept of syndication. So there's a website called AngelList, there's one called Seed Invest, there's another called Republic, and they allow investors to put very small amounts of money to work. $500, $1,000, $5,000. It's a very new concept. And I had one of the first syndicates called jasonssyndicate.com. And it's now at 2,600 members. And when we invest in a company, I might put in $25,000 to $500,000. The syndicate will then come in for an equal amount or more. So of the last 5 or 6 deals, we've had maybe four of the last 6 deals have been over $1 million, have come in from our syndicate.
So would you say the timing is pretty good, or are we still a little bit far away for that kind of angel investing syndicate model here?
No, it should have been here already.
Okay.
And I think one of the problems is optimism. And people just aren't aware of it yet. So it's an awareness problem and an optimism problem. What I encourage people to do is, especially people who have high net worths, who have a lot of money, is to put 1 to 10% of their money to work in angel investing if they are interested in hanging out with the smartest, most driven people in the world who want to change the world. That's the most exciting thing about being an angel investor. Your job is to sit, and it's very similar for journalists, you sit with people who want to change the world for the better and create very innovative products, and then you ask them questions, and they educate you all day long. And so I just get smarter and smarter and smarter because I hang out with people who are much smarter than myself. And you have many rich people here in Japan who look at their phone and see some very large bank balance, and they have some great net worth. And those are just numbers on a server somewhere. They don't actually exist in reality. It's an abstraction. And if they were to, instead of buying cars or clothes or trips or second houses or third houses, if they put that money to work in startups, it would do a lot more for society. And I think Japan's economy could be growing much faster if that, I call it dead money. It's just money sitting there on the sidelines doing nothing. And it also could get a greater return. And so the reason I wrote my book in America was I wanted more people to know the secrets of angel investing, all the mistakes I've made, and some of my theories on why I've been successful and gotten lucky in some cases, and how to increase your luck and not lose money, increase returns. And I was very happy that maybe 6 or 7 countries have bought the book. The Japanese publisher Nikkei was the first to translate it. I think you'd find that shocking that the Japanese were the first to get it done. It's kind of interesting to me. And so I think that this could be a movement here where you only need to get maybe 100 angel investors together to get this started. And I met with a dozen of them while I was here for the week. And some of them have 50 investments, 100 investments each. And a lot of them are not working together. Working together, you could fund a company for $1 million with 100 people, $10,000 each. If it doesn't work out, who cares? A rich person loses $10,000. That's like, a typical person, a normal person losing 100. It would suck if you lost a $100 bill, but in 2 weeks you wouldn't remember losing it. That's what happens when rich people lose $10,000. They're like, oh, I lost $10,000, I don't even remember.
So having spent a week, what technologies or services or even just markets have you seen here that you found interesting?
That's a good question. The gaming markets and the mobile markets here are very sophisticated, as are the social networks, and very different. Obviously, people here are addicted to Twitter, just like in America. How many people here, raise your hand if you use Twitter too much? How many people are using Twitter too much? Yeah, it looks like about half the audience are addicted. And the other half are addicted too. They just don't want to admit it, or they haven't admitted it to themselves yet. But social networks are still growing, and I think there's still an opportunity to compete with Facebook and Twitter, and you see that with Musical.ly's and some of those other sites where they combine music together. The smartphone revolution, it feels like, oh my God, everything that could have been done has been done. It's not even close to true. We're probably maybe halfway done with the smartphone revolution. In another 10 years, AR glasses will be ready. But if you use Magic Leap or if you use HoloLens from Microsoft, it's very clear that those technologies are not ready. If you put them on and you were to look at an object here on the table, the field of view is like this. It's not very big. And so when you move your head, the world disappears. It's a terrible experience. It's going to take 10 years and probably Apple to design something very beautiful. Robotics is something that had a very false start. We saw the Roomba back in the day, or maybe the Segway and some other robotic solutions. But now we're seeing the cost of robotic arms getting lower, the ability to program them getting easier, and their dexterity really is getting interesting. So we have a company in America called CafeX, which actually was started in Hong Kong. I brought the founder, Henry, who was 20 years old, to Silicon Valley. We invested about $10 million, my friends and I, into that company. They now have 3 robotic cafes in San Francisco, and they're doing serious revenue, and I think that company will change the world. And many people will not have to do manual labor unless they want to. Vertical takeoff and landing, drones, sounds crazy. And drones are another technology that, it felt like they kind of spiked and everybody played with them and people bought them and then people used them 3 times and they sit in a closet. But the real interesting thing about technology is a lot of times they start as hobbies and people are tinkering with them and then they go away and you think they're dead and then they come back. Right? VR is one of those. VR went away for a long time, and then Oculus and now augmented reality is starting to bring this concept back. It's probably, in 6, 7, 8 years, you'll know somebody who has flown a quadcopter as a human. Like right now, people may have seen some videos on the internet, but in 5 to 10 years, people will have somebody in this room or a couple of people in this room will have ridden one.
Do you think that'll happen here first or probably China first?
one of the things about technology now is all the information is on the internet, and we're building upon sensors and open source software, so anybody can do it. It's not like the United States has a lock on any one technology, or Japan or China. Now it's a race of entrepreneurs and how bold they are. That's really what's happened in the technology industry. There's not like a hidden proprietary technology stack anymore. All the technology stacks are on the internet, and they're all very public. And so today I met with an investor who has, about 30 drone investments, and a couple of the drone investments are in VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing, and passenger drones, passenger quadcopters. And so these will have a tremendous impact on cities, just like self-driving cars will. That's something that's 5 to 10 years away from being available on highways and in cities that have been designed for self-driving. It's not going to work in Tokyo.
So now that
Yet.
you've
Yeah.
immersed yourself in Japan for a week,
Yeah.
how many investments do you think you'll actually make as a result of your trip
It's
there?
interesting. Every time I go to a different city, I come back with 2 or 3 investments. And so, I plan a budget to go to the city, and I have my ticket, my hotel, food, and then $300,000 or $400,000 in investments. So I come back poorer every time. But when we just were in Sydney, and in Australia, there's a big startup community, and we invited 3 of the companies and put $100,000 into each. I could see myself investing in 3 or 4 Japanese companies in the next year. And what I like to do is make friends with the investors here and say, here's where I can be helpful. Here's what I do really well as an investor. If you have somebody, let me know. And I have one Japanese founder, Steve, I think he's in the room somewhere, from Anyplace, and he came to my incubator, and he's running his company in America. So it's not exactly a Japanese company, it's a Japanese founder in America. But I would like to see, and the message I would like to get across to Japanese founders specifically is to think a little bit bigger. And then to the rich people in Japan, my message is take more risk. So take risk and go global. These are the only 2 leaks or problems or opportunities, depending on how you look at the world, right now in Japan. People are not taking international swings. And I think the reason is it's a very functioning ecosystem. You raise a couple of $1 million, then you raise $10 million, then you go public, and you do very well for yourself. But there's another level of startups, which is what Sony did, what Nintendo did, what Uber did, Google did, and Facebook did, which is take over the planet. And I don't get that sense. And I think it's because it's almost a very specific playbook of how to get to a $100 million or $200 million valuation. In America, people who are much less competent than Japanese entrepreneurs here come out of the gate and want to build a global company that gets to $10 billion, and they'll never do it. These are some people who are just delusional. But there are people here who could do it, but they're not thinking big enough. And so to me, it's almost like there's this, when you build a fire, like sometimes you get like really hot coals, and you think the fire is dead because, it just looks like a bunch of coals, and you put a log on it, and just poof, goes right up. That's Japan right now in terms of entrepreneurship. And I was thinking about culture a lot when I was here for the week. And America thinks that our culture is the best, and we like to export culture. Like you guys all get our Marvel movies or, TV shows, music, whatever. But the truth is, Americans are obsessed with Japanese culture. Whether it's anime or video games or cars or food. Music, not so much. Some work to do there. Fashion, for sure. And so the entrepreneurs here are missing a huge opportunity. They would get such a great welcome in America, and I think they're playing too conservative. And the fear of failure here is honorable. I understand that people don't want to fail, but the culture of failure must come to Japan in order for it to grow again and reach the level of greatness that we felt when I was a teenager in the 80s and into the 90s. I worked for Sony Music, and Sony had bought Columbia Pictures, Sony Music, had Columbia Records, and a bunch of other assets. And that seems to have been lost. People are thinking only about Japan right now. They have to think international, global, because back then it was harder to build a global company. Building a global company in the 80s was hard. Building a global company now is easy. It's very easy because of the internet. If you want to advertise your product or service in another country, all you have to do is get on Instagram or Google, and you can just advertise anywhere. Marketing or hiring people, very easy.
So you have your podcast, et cetera. So
Yeah.
really, you're also the right person to maybe tell the audience a bit about trends, new ideas that are coming up in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
You know, things that maybe people here may not yet be aware of. You know, what can you say about that? What's the buzz right now over there?
Yeah. I'm going to take a spin on your question, which is, I often get asked as an investor, what category are you in? Right? What are you going to invest in next? Drones, virtual reality, on demand, crypto, which is nonsense, but we'll talk about that, or we can talk about it. The thing I like to do is invest in founders, and the best founders now are doing a very specific technique that Facebook and Google and then eventually Uber perfected. And what Uber did was they made a playbook of how to launch Uber in a city. And then they launched another city with that playbook. Then they launched 3 cities with that playbook. And the people who had launched the first 2 cities would talk and mentor the people who were doing the next 3 cities. And they would actually visit them and walk them through the playbook. And this is also referred to as 0 to 1, getting from like no product, no customers to that like first product and first great customer. And then after that, you scale. And I think that technique is so amazing if you do it right. So I have seen many companies now perfect their product or service in one market and then just bring it to market after market. And then they just get emboldened. And then they're able to raise large amounts of money because there's so much dry powder and dead money in the world just sitting on the sidelines and waiting for people with bold ideas. So this is something that people really need to study, is how did Airbnb penetrate all of these markets? Well, they had a playbook, and they had teams that took the playbook and then brought them to different cities.
So look for the playbook. So to
Make
speak.
the playbook and study how other people did it. Because each time you move to a different region, you get a chance to refine it and localize it. And the next person can add to the book and give their own spin on it. And they would give each of those city heads at Uber, from my understanding of it, a little bit of autonomy. So if they wanted to change things or tweak the app, they had a little bit of more freedom than you would think to do that. Sometimes we get them in trouble. One time, I got a press person was calling me, and they were very upset that an Uber ad in France had some people who were not wearing clothes in it. And I said, well, I think that's okay in France, but I understand that that's offensive in the United States today. But, you know, the local person there was just like, I'm just going to make ads, and if somebody's topless in an ad, it's not a big deal, right? So there are things like that can happen if you do this distributed idea where anybody can do whatever they want in their local market. So you sometimes have people make mistakes, or there's cultural differences, but that can be a benefit too, because people could, here in Tokyo, the average cab driver is better than, or as good or better than, the highest end taxis in America. Like, we don't wear white gloves in our taxis. Some taxis, no taxis will get out and open the door for you. That's just crazy to think about in America. So, different cultures, you have to study them a bit. But this playbook model is something that would benefit the entrepreneurs in Japan greatly, greatly.
So we've got some time, I think, for a few questions from the audience. I'm not sure if there's a microphone that will go around, but if there isn't one, just shout in a loud voice. You can ask your question in Japanese or English. If you ask it in Japanese, I'll translate it for Jason here.
Certainly there's an entrepreneur who wants to pitch me or ask a question.
So you need to shield your eyes.
It's very
here.
bright
Yeah,
here.
that's right. Any questions? Anybody?
Oh, here we go.
Go ahead.
I'm very interested in your view on crypto. You said it's nonsense, and I would like to know more.
Yes, thank you.
We might run out of time here.
Yeah, exactly. So cryptocurrency is one of the hugest scams I've ever seen in my lifetime. And what's particularly tragic about it is that it was based upon some very real technology and some very real innovative founders who wanted to change the world for very good reasons. But what it showed was that unregulated currency systems are so dangerous and so fluid and powerful that if you put them out into the world in an unregulated way, all of the scammers and grifters and criminals and incompetent people in the world will glom onto them and then use them to scam people out of their money. The concept that some of these ICOs specifically raised hundreds of millions of dollars with no product, with no team, having written a white paper, a poorly written business plan, claiming that their technology would magically allow people to use tokens. And nobody in the world had ever used tokens other than maybe getting on the subway or, in America, Chuck E. Cheese, which was like an arcade. Nobody had ever used tokens before. And so now you had billions of dollars being thrown into an ecosystem that magically tokens, utility tokens, that nobody had ever used. And all of these idiots poured money into it. And what it showed to me was, one, if you create an unregulated casino on the internet that's global, people will cheat. People will commit crime. This shouldn't come as a newsflash to anybody who's been a gambler like myself. I get invited to a lot of weird poker games, and I can tell you, like, I could totally see people dealing from the bottom of the deck or cheating. But when you create an anonymous global system and people are shifting money to each other without even meeting them into wallets, without any legal documents, what do you think is going to occur? Every criminal in the world is going to go after that. Now, because there was an intellectual core to this movement, those people lost their own movement. The creators of Bitcoin and Ethereum, these were all really interesting people. I know a lot of them. They were good people doing technology, but they had their technology and their whole vision co-opted by scammers and criminals. And there was a huge amount of naive, not even optimism, just naivete. People thought that governments would allow their currency and their power to just be given to some serverless open source project in the world. And I would talk to these crypto kitties about their vision, and they would say, yeah, we can't be stopped. And I said, wow, you know, I remember hearing this before. Who said they couldn't be stopped? Oh yeah, Napster, right? Like the peer-to-peer people said they couldn't be stopped, right? And like all those brands are now gone. And if you try to go to China and use a VPN, you will go to jail for using a VPN. Now, do you think a country like China, a communist country with, you know, a lot of controls, or even South Korea, a very nationalistic country, or Japan, is going to take their monetary system that they defend and curate over centuries and just throw it out onto the internet and be like, well, there it goes. We'll see what happens to society. Of course they're not. They'll ban it in 2 seconds. And they were like, well, you can't ban it because it's on the internet and there's nobody to ban. I'm like, all you have to do is just take 10 people who traded Bitcoin and put them in jail, or 10 people who put up exchanges and put them in jail, and it'll be stopped. And then there was this crazy, like, FOMO that occurred, fear of missing out, and then this FOCO, fear of cashing out. And it really showed to me human nature. Humans are so greedy and they're so fearful of missing out on something that their behavior will become completely illogical. Just like if, you know, some comic book is sold out, or some concert is sold out, or a restaurant is sold out, people will go crazy for it. That's what happened in crypto. The only silver lining I really saw in the whole disaster, where there was 2,000 ICOs and 1,600 or 1,700 of them, according to a pretty well-accepted report at this point, they're just gone. Nobody even knows where the money went. It's just stolen. Like crime of the century. Unbelievable. Like that this has not been, you know, stopped. But the one thing it did show to me is that there is an appetite for risk by civilians, normal people, to invest in high-risk startups. So high risk that they've never even met them. They just threw their money at people they'd never met who didn't have a product. Now, if I told you like Uber selling shares or Airbnb selling shares or LinkedIn, whatever, before they were public, you might be like, I use that product. Sure, I'll put 500 into it. That would seem a little more logical to me if you used the product and you loved it. But here, people didn't even use the product. So I know that I'm going to piss off a lot of crypto people in the audience. But honestly, the crypto people need to go away until they actually can build a product. Because the rest of us in the technology industry are taking it seriously. We take investment seriously. We take investing money seriously. We take the governance of these companies seriously. And crypto people don't. And I cannot believe that they're taking this amount of money from citizens, normal people, and they haven't built the product. It is unethical and it is abhorrent. But I don't have very strong feelings about it.
On that positive note, as expected, we are actually out of time. So I'll take one more question if the questioner wants to jump up and down and yell loudly.
Oh, there's one way in the back there. I see two,
Really?
3 now. Oh, man, I answered the crypto question. Here we go. Now we got questions.
Okay, we've got one more. Let's just do one more.
Here we go. I have a cryptocurrency company, and I want to know why you slammed it. Go ahead.
Go ahead in Japanese or
すみ
English.
ません。僕の質問はですね、僕は20年前に iPod のクリックホイールを発明したんですが、そのクリックホイールを使って、スティーブ・ジョブズが、デジタル音楽再生機の世界を、全部彼が掌握してしまったんですが、で、これは20年前にこのハードウェアの発明をしたんですが、最近数年前に3次元空間用の、入力装置をまた新たに発明しまして、でこれでちょっと売れなくなった VR、3次元メガネや 3D プリンターのマーケットをその入力装置によって一気に掘り起こせる自信作なんですけれども、あなたはいろいろインターネット関係のプロジェクトをエンジェル投資されていますけれども、僕のものは完全にハードウェアの発明ということになるんですが、そういった分野もあなたの投資対象になっているんでしょうか。
So the questioner said he said he was the inventor of the click wheel for the iPod 20 years ago.
I saw him flipping it, yeah.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
And that Steve Jobs took his invention and made a lot of money off of it.
Okay.
Now he has invented a 3D input device. So he's asking you as an investor
Sure.
whether that would be a hardware product that you'd be willing to invest in.
Sure, just ask him how much money he would like, and I have one of my people here will just hand him a bag of money. You just tell him.
We'll take that offline then.
Yes.
Well,
I'm happy to meet him. Yes. And hear more about this 3D click wheel in the sky.
So thank you everybody for your time. Thank
you
you
so much.
Jason for
My
your
pleasure.
insight. And I think that wraps up the events for today.